All right, hey everybody, it's Nathaniel Avila reporting from Dallas County, and who am I here with today?
Hey, hi.
Hello, how are you doing today?
Good. Looking at this wonderful rainy weather here in Dublin.
Yeah, is it still raining outside? It was like raining cats and dogs earlier.
Over here near the airport, it is looking like there's a cloud, but the surrounding area is raining, but inside the airport it's kind of clear. It's just like a small little rain.
Okay. Speaking of which, I actually discovered the TSA's Instagram, and it's actually really funny. So,
Wow, really? I wonder what that's.
it's actually really funny. Whoever does it is actually a pretty good memer. Uh, so all right, so let's talk about. You know what we're talking about today?
I honestly
You don't remember?
no.
Okay, well, let's talk about. We're talking about the Tunguska Event, ah, which was which was an approximately 12 megaton explosion that occurred near the Podkamenaya Tunguska River in Yeniseisk Governorate, Russia, which on the morning of June 30th, 1908. So,
Huh.
let's talk about it. So we open June 30th, 1908. Blah 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 blah. At around 7:17 local time, Evenki natives and Russian settlers in the hills northwest of Lake Baikal observed a bluish light nearly as bright as the sun, moving across the sky and leaving a thin trail. Closer to the horizon, there was a flash producing a billowing cloud, followed by a pillar of fire that cast a red light on the landscape. Now the pillar split in two and faded, turning to black. About 10 minutes later, there was a sound similar to artillery fire. Eyewitnesses closer to the explosion reported that the source of the sound moved from the east to the north of them. The sounds were accompanied by a shock wave that knocked people off their feet and broke windows hundreds of kilometers away. Now, the explosion registered at seismic stations across Eurasia. The airwaves of the blast were detected in Germany, Denmark, Croatia, and even the United Kingdom. And as far away as Batavia, the Dutch West Indies, and even Washington, D.C. So it is estimated that in some places, the resulting shock wave was equivalent to an earthquake measuring 5 on the Richter magnitude scale. Over the next few days, night skies in Asia and Europe were aglow. There were contemporaneous reports of brightly lit photographs being successfully taken at midnight, without the age of flashbulbs, in Sweden and Scotland. It has been theorized that this sustained glowing effect was due to light passing a high altitude ice particles that had formed at extremely low temperatures as a result of the explosion, a phenomenon that decades later was reproduced by space shuttles. In the United States, a Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory program at the Mount Wilson Observatory in California observed a month-long decrease in atmospheric transparency consistent with the increase of suspended dust particles. So what are we thinking there?
I mean, sounds like a really big bomb went off and everyone got pictures and evidence of it and could feel it all over.
So you think it was a bomb?
A type of bomb, yeah.
Okay, what type of bomb is it?
Well, I don't think it's nuclear, but it
Yeah.
could be a little bit of anything.
All right. So let's get into what the people of Serbia had to say. Uh, so now we know that Serbia is actually a very sparsely populated in 1908, and there was accounts of the events from eyewitnesses who were in the surrounding area at the time, and regional newspapers reported the event shortly after it occurred. So this is the testimony of one S. Semenov, which was recorded by a Russian meteorologist, Leonid Kulik's expedition in 1930. Okay, so this is what I had to say. At breakfast time, I was sitting by the house in Vanavara trading post, approximately 40 miles south of the explosion, facing north. Suddenly, I saw that directly to the north, over Onkul's Tunguska Road, the sky split in two, and fire peered high and wide over the forest. The split in the sky grew larger, and the entire northern side was covered with fire. At that moment, I became so hot I couldn't bear it, as if my shirt was on fire. From the northern side, where the fire was, came strong heat. I wanted to tear off my shirt and throw it down, but then the sky shut closed. A strong thump sounded, and I was thrown a few meters. I lost my senses for a moment, but then my wife ran out and led me to the house. After that, such noise came as if rocks were falling or cannons were firing. The earth shook, and when I was on the ground, I pressed my head down, fearing rocks would smash it. When the sky opened up, hot wind raced it through the houses like from cannons, which left traces on the ground like pathways, and it damaged some crops. Later, we saw that many windows were shattered, and in the barn, a part of the iron lock snapped. So, what do you think about this Semenov's guy's testimony?
I mean, it seems like a legitimate testimony of someone experiencing and surviving something, a bomb type of thing that hit the ground with the aftershocks that happened.
So what do you? Because he said that the sky opened up. What do you think that means?
Sky opening up from certain areas. It could mean that the clouds parted.
Okay.
Where initial blast from whatever hit, literally just in like anime SQ, there was clouds in the sky. The bomb hit and the aftershock shook it so well that it cleared it to a nice crisp blue.
Okay. So let's go into another one. A testimony of Chuchin of Shanyagir tribe, which was as recorded by I.M. Suslav in 1926. So this is what this person had to say. We had a hut by the river with my brother Shekarin. We were sleeping. Suddenly we both woke up at the same time. Somebody shoved us. We heard a whistling and felt strong wind. Shekarin said, "Can you hear all those birds flying overhead?" We were both in the hut. We couldn't see what was going on outside. Suddenly, I got shoved again. This time, so hard I fell into the fire. I got scared. Shekarin got scared too. We started crying out for father, mother, brother, but no one answered. There was noise beyond the hut. We could hear trees falling down. Shekarin and I got out of our sleeping bags and wanted to run out. But then the thunder struck. It was the first thunder. The earth began to move and rock. The wind hit our hut and knocked it over. My body was pushed down by sticks, but my head was in the clear. When I saw a wonder, trees were falling. The branches were on fire. It became slightly bright. How could I say this? As if there were a second sun. My eyes were hurting. I even closed them. It was like what the Russians call lightning. And immediately there was a loud thunderclap. This was the second thunder. The morning was sunny. There were no clouds. Our sun was shining brightly as usual, and suddenly there came a second one. Shekarin and I had some difficulty getting out from under the remains of our hut. Then we saw that above, but in a different place. There was another flash. A loud thunder came. This was the third thunderstrike. Wind came again, knocked us off our feet. struck the fallen trees. We looked at the fallen trees, watched the treetops get snapped off, watched the fires. Suddenly, Shakaran yelled, "Look up," and pointed with his hand. I looked there, and I saw another flash, and it made another thunder, but the noise was less than before. This was the fourth strike, like normal thunder. Now I remember there was also one more thunder strike, but it was small and somewhere far away, where the sun goes to sleep. So there, that was Chuchin of the the Shanyagir tribes testimony of the event. So what do you think?
That's very interesting that he said there's 4 thunderclaps that he heard, which means like he was far enough to get each of the different sound waves that hit.
Yeah. So do you think these thunderclaps were actual thunderclaps, or were they something else?
No, it's the reverberation of the after the wave, the thing that pushed him over.
Yeah.
It's essentially almost exactly like lightning and thunder. The lightning, the color that strikes that you see, is the wind that pushed them over. The thunder is the clap, or the sound that they hear. So pretty much the heat wave or the wave that pushed them over several times, and then the clap is the aftermath, the resonant of the sound of what you felt.
Okay. So let's go on to what the Siberia newspaper wrote on July 2nd, 1908. Okay. On the morning of June 17th, around 9, we observed an unusual natural occurrence in the North Kurilinsky village. The peasants saw... It says the peasants on there. So they call them the peasants. Saw to the northwest, rather high above the horizon, some strangely bright, bluish-white heavenly body, which for 10 minutes moved downwards. The body appeared as a pipe, i.e. a cylinder. The sky was cloudless. Only a small dark cloud was observed in the general direction of the bright body. It was hot and dry. As the body neared the ground, i.e. the forest, the bright body seemed to smudge, and then turn into a giant billow of black smoke. The loud knocking, which is not thunder, was heard as if large stones were falling, or artillery was fired. All buildings shook. At the same time, the cloud began emitting flames of uncertain shapes. All villagers were stricken with panic and took to the streets. Women cried, thinking it was the end of the world. The author of these lines was in the meantime in the forest about 6.4 kilometers north of Kurinsk, and heard the northeast some kind of artillery barrage that separated intervals of 15 minutes at least 10 times. In Kurinsk, in a few buildings in the walls facing northeast, window glass shook. So there it is. What do you think about that? So in this newspaper article, it's not thunder, but it sounded more like artillery fire.
I mean, they sound very similar. But probably the only reason that they use thunder clapping is probably they never experience artillery failure. And most of the time, when things go boom in the sense, it's artillery fire that's happened.
Mm-hmm. So are you still of the mindset that this thing is like a bomb of some kind?
It has to, well, in my set and all the things that's happened, it's very descriptive of almost a nuclear bomb without the nuclear fallout that happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because there was no description of like a mushroom cloud or anything.
Well, I mean, the cloud that you described at first, and not all bombs that are dropped do mushroom clouds. I mean, there are different types of clouds, but they're not all mushroom clouds. But there's no, I mean, yes, there's some tellings are talking about heat going with it, but the thunderclaps or the artillery sounds that it sounds exactly like a bomb went off.
Oh.
And there's feeling the aftershocks of it, but there's no radiation or nuclear pulse to it. It's just the heat and the sound. Do we have like a crater of where this hit, or is the Russian government hiding that?
I don't know. Maybe.
Or have its quarantine of nothing here?
Maybe. So let's see what Serbian Life wrote in July 27th, 1908. So when the meteorite fell, so this one is saying it's a meteorite. Strong tremors on the ground were observed, and near the Lovat village of the Kansk Ost, 2 strong explosions were heard, as if from a large caliber artillery. So, Serbian Life is saying it's a meteor. What do you think?
I mean, but that's just saying there was only 2 sounds of. We're getting 2 to 4 different sounds of artillery thunderclaps that's being heard.
Mm-hmm.
So it still goes back to where's the impact? Where's the center of said strike?
Right.
Whether it's a meteor or a bomb.
Maybe Krasnoyarets newspaper has something for us. That was written in July 13th, 1908. So, Kazemskoye village, on the 17th, an unusual atmospheric event was observed. At 7:43, a noise akin to a strong wind was heard. Immediately afterward, a horrific thump sounded, followed by an earthquake that literally shook the buildings as if they were hit by a large log or a heavy rock. The first thump was followed by a second, and then a third. When the interval between the first and third thumps was accompanied by an unusual underground rattle, similar to a railway upon which dozens of trains were traveling at the same time. Afterwards, for 5 to 6 minutes, an exact likeliness of artillery fire was heard. 50 to 60 salvos in short, equal intervals, which got progressively weaker. After 1.5 to 2 minutes after one of the barrages, 6 more thumps were heard, like cannon firing, but individual, loud, and accompanied by tremors. The sky, at first sight, appeared to be clear. There was no wind and no clouds. Upon clear inspection to the north, i.e. where most of the thumps were heard, a kind of ashen cloud was seen near the horizon, which kept getting smaller and more transparent, and possibly by around 2 to 3 p.m., completely disappeared. So, what do you think about that?
Interesting. Just the sounding of it is just interesting. It still corroborates with what's happened in the other stories.
So you think it's pretty consistent across the board here?
I mean, between 2 to 4 sounds, but still hearing the sounds, yes.
All right. So let's go into what the scientists have to say. So since the since the 1908 event, there have been an estimated 1,000 scholarly papers published about the Tunguska explosion. Owing to the remoteness of the site and limited instrumentation available at the time of the event, modern scientific interpretations of its cause and magnitude have relied chiefly on damage assessments and geological studies conducted many years after the event. Estimates of its energy have ranged from 3 to 30 megatons of TNT. It was not until more than a decade after the event that any scientific analysis of the region took place, in part due to the isolation of the area and significant political upheaval affecting Russia in the 1910s. In 1921, the Russian meteorologist Leonard Kulik led a team to the Podkamennaya Tunguska River Basin to conduct a survey for the Soviet Academy of Sciences. Although they never visited the central blast area, many local accounts of the event led Kulik to believe that the explosion had been caused by a giant meteorite impact. Upon returning, he persuaded the Soviet government to fund an expedition to the suspected impact zone based on the prospect of salvaging meteoric iron. So there we go. This Kulik guy, says it's a meteorite. So, thoughts?
I mean, if you can test the center of what it is and only go by what's being told or magnitude afterwards, can you really say it's just a meteorite? For all we know, it could have been some otherworldly fight to save our world and the heroes plummeting to the ground, aka Goku and Vegeta.
Okay, so you think the fictional characters Goku and Vegeta were fighting and they caused the event in 1908?
To be honest, I mean, it could be, and it doesn't necessarily have to be them, but some super beings fighting for Earth's right to be existing is no. I mean, it's a possibility.
Okay, so you're saying it's like a Bhagavad Gita situation where they have like floating cities and they were like fighting each other and stuff.
Could be fighting each other, but you know, in superhuman type fights, when a person gets thrown to the ground, there is impact and clapping of sounds like artillery because that body's hitting the earth really badly.
Okay, so all right. So let's see. So Kulik actually led a scientific expedition to the Tunguska blast site in 1927. Now he hired local Evenki hunters to guide his team to the center of the blast area, where they expected to find an impact crater. To their surprise, there was no crater to be found at ground zero.
Oh, don't.
Okay. Instead, they found a zone roughly 5 miles across, where trees were scorched and devoid of branches, but still standing upright. Trees were distant from the center, had been partly scorched and knocked down from the direction away from the center, creating a large radial pattern of downed trees. So, fast forward to the 1960s, it was established that the zone was leveled forest occupied in an area of 830 square miles, its shape resembling of a gigantic spread-eagled butterfly with a wingspan of 43 miles and a body length of 34 miles. Upon closer examination, Kulik located holes that he erroneously concluded were meteorite holes. He did not have the means at the time to excavate said holes. So, there it is. No crater has been found, but a bunch of like dead trees that are still standing upright was around this area. So what do you think that means?
In the shape of almost like a giant butterfly?
Yeah, that's what they said.
Being like a giant mothman that just freaking got plummeted to Earth?
So you're saying it's like...
Or was it John?
So you're thinking it was like Mothra who did it?
Nah, that's a possibility. Mothra.
Okay.
I mean...
The fictional kaiju Mothra did this in 1908.
Hey, I mean, Godzilla's been around almost as long. I wouldn't put it past us.
Okay. So during the following 10 years, there were 3 more expeditions to the area. Kulik found several dozens of little pothole bogs, each 10 to 50 meters or 33 to 164 feet in diameter. that which he thought might be meteoric craters. After a laborious exercise in draining one of these bogs, he found an old tree stump at the bottom, ruling out the possibility that it was a meteoric crater. So, in 1938, Kulik arranged for an aerial photographic survey of the area, covering the central part of the leveled forest, 97 square miles. The original negatives of these aerial photographs were burned in 1975 by order of Yevgeny Krinov, then chairman of the Committee on Meteorites of the USSR Committee of Science, Academy of Sciences, as part of an initiative to dispose flammable nitrate film. Positive prints were preserved for further study in the Russian city of Tomsk. So what do you think that means? This Krinov guy declared that these photographs be burned.
He didn't like what image that was available from an up top view, and it probably scared the living bejesus out of him, and it's like, this should not exist. Burn the photographs!
Okay. I mean, they still have the positive prints, but they just don't have the negatives anymore.
Evidence, still evidence, yes. Keep the positive, but the negative shows something that we should not know of this world.
Okay. So, expeditions sent to the area in the 1950s and 60s found microscopic silicate and magnetite spheres in siftings of the soil. Similar spheres were predicted to exist in the felled trees, although they could not be detected by contemporary means. Later expeditions did identify such spheres in the resin of the trees. Chemical analysis showed that the spheres contain high proportions of nickel relative to iron, which also found in meteorites, leading to the conclusion they were of extraterrestrial origin. The concentration of the spheres in difficult regions of the soil were also found to be consistent with the expected distribution of debris from a meteoroid airburst. Later studies of the spheres found unusual ratios of numerous other metals relative to the surrounding environment, which has taken further evidence of their extraterrestrial origin. So, chemical analysis of peat bogs from the area revealed numerous anomalies considered consistent with the impact event. The isotopic signatures of carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen at the layer of the bogs corresponding to 1908 were found to be inconsistent with the isotopic ratios measured in the adjacent layers. And this abnormality was not found in bogs located outside the area. The region of the bogs showing these anomalous signatures also contains an unusually high proportion of iridium, similar to the iridium layer found in the Cretaceous Paleogene boundary. These unusual proportions were believed to result from debris from the falling body that deposited in the bogs. The nitrogen is believed to have been deposited as acid rain and suspected fallout from the explosion. However, other scientists disagree. Some papers report that hydrogen, carbon, and nitrogen isotopic compositions with signatures similar to those of Ci and Cm carbonaceous chondrites were found in the Tunguska's peat layers dating from the TE and that the iridium anomalies were also observed. Measurements performed in other laboratories have not confirmed these results, though. So, they're finding a bunch of stuff in there that is probably leaning towards the fact that it might be a meteorite. So, what do you think?
Well, meteorite, but the interesting part is the whole time frame that it was said in there, that it was during, like, possibly a little bit after the dinosaurs, but before humanity.
Mm. What do you think that what
So
has to do with anything?
that's kind of leaning towards Mothra now.
Okay. So, the leading scientific explanation for the explosion is a meteor airburst by an asteroid 4.6 miles above the Earth's surface. Now, meteoroids enter Earth's atmosphere from outer space every day, traveling at a speed of at least 7 miles per second. The heat generated by compression of air in front of the body as it travels through the atmosphere is immense, and the most meteoroids burn up or explode before they reach the ground. Early estimates of the energy of the Tunguska air blast range from 10 to 15 megatons of TNT to 30 megatons of TNT, depending on the exact height of the burst estimated when the scaling laws from the effects of nuclear weapons are employed. Now, more recent calculations that include the effect of the object's momentum find that more of the energy was focused downward than would be the case of a nuclear explosion, and estimate that the air burst had an energy range from 3 to 5 megatons of TNT. The 15 megaton estimate represents the energy of about 1,000 times greater than that of Trinity, which is the code name of the first detonation of a nuclear weapon. So,
Told you, close.
okay. So, and roughly equal to that of the United States Castle Bravo nuclear test in 1954. Now, one third of the Soviet Union's Tsar Bomba test in 1961. A 2019 paper suggests the explosive power of the Tunguska event may have been around 20 to 30 megatons. Now, since the second half of the 20th century, close monitoring of Earth's atmosphere through infrasound and satellite observation was shown that asteroid airbursts with energies comparable to those of nuclear weapons routinely occur. Although Tunguska-sized events in the order of 5 to 15 megatons are much rarer. Now, Eugene Schumacher estimated that 20 kiloton events occur annually, and that Tunguska-sized events occur about once every 300 years. More recent estimates place Tunguska-sized events at about once every 1,000 years, with 5 kiloton airbursts averaging about once per year. Most of these airbursts were thought to be caused by asteroid impactors, as opposed to mechanically weaker cometary materials based on their typical penetration depths into the Earth's atmosphere. So the largest asteroid airburst to be observed in modern instrumentation was the 500 kiloton Chelyabinsk meteor in 2013, which shattered windows and produced meteorites. So there you have it. It's all natural. These things happen all the time. So what's the big deal? What do you think? Do you agree with them that this is just a thing that happens all the time?
I don't think so. I mean, it's kind of weird to have. I mean, yes, meteorites to come up, but if they're small enough, them just bouncing, but the size wave and thing, just having something that big impact and not leave a crater,
That's true.
and not leave real evidence other than its components scattered around the trees. I don't know. I think I'm kind of leaning towards Mothra here.
Okay.
Not making it through and disintegrating into its own death, and that's the imprint.
Okay. So let's fast forward to 2020. A group of Russian scientists used a range of computer models to calculate the passage of asteroids with the diameters of 200, 150 meters at oblique angles across the Earth's atmosphere. They used a range of assumptions about the Earth's composition as if it was made of iron, rock, or ice. Now, the model, which most closely matched the observed event, was an iron asteroid up to 200 meters in diameter, traveling at 11.2 kilometers per second, which glanced off the Earth's atmosphere and returned to solar orbit. Now, the explosion's effect on the trees near the hypercenter of the explosion was similar to the effects of the conventional Operation Blowdown. These effects were caused by a blast wave produced by a large air burst explosions. Trees directly below the explosions were stripped of the blast wave. As the blast wave moves vertically downward but remains standing upright, while trees farther away are knocked over because the blast wave is traveling closer to horizontal when it reaches them. So, Soviet experiments performed in the mid-1960s with model forests made of matches on wire stakes and small explosive charges slid downward on wires, produced a butterfly-shaped blast pattern similar to the pattern found in the Tunguska site. These experiments suggested that the object had approached at an angle of roughly 30 degrees from the ground and 115 degrees from the north, and it exploded in midair. So there's your answer. That's why there's no crater. So it just exploded in midair.
I mean, Mothra in the newest Gazella did explode in midair and give its energy to Godzilla, but there's still aftermath, so, it's still a thing.
Okay. So let's go back to 1930. The British meteorologist and mathematician F.J.W. Whipple suggested that the Tunguska body was a small comet. A comet is composed of dust and volatiles, such as weaker water ice and frozen gases, and could have been completely vaporized by the impact of the Earth's atmosphere, leaving no obvious traces. So the comet hypothesis was further supported by the glowing skies, or sky glows of the bright nights, observed across Eurasia for several evenings. After the impact, which are possibly explained by dust and ice that have been dispersed by the comet's tail across the upper atmosphere. Now, the cometary hypothesis gained a general acceptance among Soviet Tunguska investigators by the 1960s. In 1978, Slavic astronomer Lubor Krysak suggested that the body was a fragment of comet Encke. This was a periodic comet with an extremely short period of just over 3 years that stays entirely within the orbit of Jupiter. It is also responsible for Beta Taurids, an annual meteor shower with a maximum activity around June 28th to 29th. Now, the Tunguska event coincided with the peak activity of that shower, when an approximate trajectory of the Tunguska object is consistent with that of what could be expected from a fragment of comet Encke. It is now known that the bodies of this kind explode at frequent intervals tens to hundreds of kilometers above the ground. Military satellites have been observing these explosions for decades. During 2019, astronomers searched for hypothesized asteroids 100 meters in diameter from the Taurid swarm between July 5th to 11th and July 21st to August 10th. As of February 2020, there have been no reports of discoveries of any such objects. So, there's that. So, what do you think is going on here? So, do you think
Could be anything.
So, do you think it's a comet? Because these two people are saying that it might be a comet as opposed to a meteorite or meteor or asteroid.
A comet, a bomb, meteorite, Mothra. I mean, something didn't quite land and exploded mid-air, and now we have chemical base in a butterfly shape. I mean, it's a possibility, or some type of super being that just, like Krillin, didn't make it.
Okay. So, in 1983, astronomer Zdeněk Sekanina published a paper criticizing the comet hypothesis. He pointed out that the body composed of cometary material traveling through the atmosphere along with such shallow trajectory ought to have been disintegrated, whereas the Tunguska body apparently remained intact into the lower atmosphere. Sekanina also argued that the evidence pointed to a dense rocky object, probably of asteroidal origin. So this hypothesis was further boosted in 2001 when Farinella, Foschini et al. Released a study calculating the probabilities based on orbital modeling extracted from the atmospheric trajectories of the Tunguska object. They concluded with a probability of 83% that the object moved in an asteroidal path originated from the asteroid belt, rather than the cometary one. Proponents of the comet hypothesis have suggested that the object was an extinct comet with a stony mantle that allowed it to penetrate the atmosphere. So, there's that. So, the chief difficulty in the asteroid hypothesis is that a stony object should have produced a large crater where it struck to the ground, but no such crater has been found. It has been hypothesized that the passage of the asteroid through the atmosphere caused pressures and temperatures to build up to a point where the asteroid abruptly disintegrated in a huge explosion. Now, the destruction would have been complete by no remnants of substantial size survived, and the material scattered into the upper atmosphere during the explosion would have caused the sky glows. Models published in 1993 suggested that the stony body would have been about 200 feet across, with physical properties somewhere between ordinary chondrite and sea chondrites also. So, typical carbonaceous chondrite substance tends to be dissolved with water rather quickly unless it's frozen. So, there's that. Now let's talk about Christopher Shiba and others who have proposed a process whereby a stony meteorite would have exhibited the behavior of the Tunguska impactor. Their models show that the forces opposing the body's descent become greater than the cohesive force holding it together. It blows apart, releasing nearly all of its energy at once. The result is no crater, with damage distributed over its fairly wide radius and all the damage resulting from the thermal energy released from the blast. So, what do you think? Is it a comet or an asteroid? I'm kind of leaning more towards comet here.
Well, it's a possibility. I mean, if it shows the signs, maybe, but I mean, maybe.
Okay. So, three-dimensional numerical modeling of the Tunguska impact done by Utyuzhenikov and Rudenko in 2008 supports the comet hypothesis. According to the results, the comet matter dispersed in the atmosphere while the destruction of the forest was caused by the shockwave. So there's that. To the 1990s, Italian researcher, coordinated by physicist Giuseppe Longo from the University of Bologna, extracted resin from the core to the trees in the area and of impact to examine trapped particles that were present during the 1908 event. They found high levels of material commonly found in rocky asteroids and rarely found in comets. So there's that whole thing. Okay. Kelly, what's his name? MC Kelly, and colleagues contend that the impact was caused by a comet because of the sightings of noctilucent clouds following the impact, a phenomenon caused by massive amounts of water vapor in the upper atmosphere. They compared noctilucent cloud formation to the exhaust plume from NASA's Endeavour space shuttle. A team of Russian researchers led by Edward Drobishevsky in 2009 have suggested that the near-Earth asteroid 2000 NB MB56 may be possible candidate for the parent body of the Tunguska event, as the asteroid had made a close approach of 27 LD, or the Earth-Moon distance, from Earth in June 27th, 1908, 3 days before the Tunguska event. So the team suspected that 2005 NB56's orbit likely fixed the modeled orbit of the Tunguska event, even with the events of weak non-gravitational forces. In 2013, analysis of fragments of the Tunguska site by joint U.S.-European team was consistent with an iron meteorite. So there you go. It looks like Team Meteorite seems to be pulling forward here. What do you think? Hello.
You might be right. You might be wrong.
How? Okay. What do you think it is? Are you still on? What do you think it is?
I mean, comment, yeah, meteorite. I mean, those are cool things and stuff, but aren't we here for the imagination? Are we here to solve what may or may not be solved? The unexplained? So I probably lean more towards the unexplained than anything.
Okay. So let's fast forward to February 2013. Chelyabinsk the Bolide event provided ample data for scientists to create new models for the Tunguska event. Researchers used data from both Tunguska and Chelyabinsk to perform statistical study of over 50 million combinations of bolide and entry properties that could produce the Tunguska scale damage when breaking apart or exploding at similar altitudes. Some models focused on combinations of properties which created scenarios with similar effects to the tree fall pattern, as well as the atmospheric and seismic pressure waves of Tunguska. 4 different computer models produced similar results. They concluded that the likeliest candidate from the Tunguska impactor was a stony body between 164 to 262 feet in diameter, entering the atmosphere at roughly 34,000 miles per hour and exploding at 6 to 9 miles altitude, and releasing explosive energy equivalent between 10 and 30 megatons. This is similar to the blast energy equivalent of the 1980 volcanic eruption of Mount St. Helens. So the researchers also concluded that impactors of this size hit the Earth at only an average interval scale of a millennia. So there it goes. It's there it is. That's the final conclusion.
Well, I mean, it's a conclusion, I guess. It could be better. It could be worse.
Yeah.
At least it has some evidence of something definitely exploded mid-air, but it just doesn't say what it is, because the only evidence we have, we carbon dated to half prehistoric and half just meteorite.
Mm-hmm. So let's go on to June 2007. The scientists of the University of Bologna identified a lake at the Tunguska region as a possible impact crater from the event. They do not dispute that the Tunguska body exploded in midair, but believe that a 33-foot fragment survived the explosion and struck the ground. Lake Checo is a small bowl-shaped lake approximately 5 miles north-northwest of the hypocenter. The hypothesis has been disputed by other impact crater specialists, though. So, a 1961 investigation had dismissed a modern origin of Lake Checo, saying that the presence of the meters-thick silt deposits at the lake's bed suggested age of at least 5,000 years. But more recent research suggests that only a meter or so of the sediment layer of the lake bed is normal lacustrine sedimentation, a depth consistent with an age of about 100 years. Now, acoustic echo soundings of the lake floor provide a support for the hypothesis that the lake was formed by the Tunguska event. The soundings revealed a conical shape for the lake bed, which is consistent with an impact crater. Magnetic readings indicate that possible meter-sized chunk of rock below the lake's deepest point may be a fragment of the colliding body. Finally, the lake's long axis points of the hypocenter of the Tunguska explosion, about 4.3 miles away. Work is still being done at the lake, still being done at Lake Checo to determine its origins. So, what do you think? Do you think this Lake Checo is the impact crater?
I mean, it's a possibility.
I don't know. It looks like all the evidence is showing that it is. Although that one group says that the lake's like 5,000 years old. But I don't know. It looks pretty convincing. So, 2017. New research by Russian scientists pointed to a rejection of the theory that Lake Checo was created by the Tunguska event. They used soil research to determine that the lake is 280 years old, or even much older. In any case, clearly older than the Tunguska event. So there goes that. So in analyzing soils from the bottom of Lake Checo, they identified a layer of radionuclide contamination from mid-20th century nuclear testing at Novaya Zemlya. The depth of this layer gave an average annual sedimentation rate of between 3.6 and 4.6 millimeters a year. These sedimentations values are less than half of the 1 centimeter a year calculated by Gasparini et al. in their 2009 publication of their analysis of the core they took from Lake Checo in 1999. Now, the Russian scientists in 2017 counted at least 280 such annual VARs in the 1,260 millimeter long core sample supplied from the bottom of the lake, representing an age of the lake that would be older than the Tunguska event. Additionally, there are problems with the impact physics. It is unlikely that the stony meteorite in the right size range would have the mechanical strength necessary to survive atmospheric passage intact, and yet still remain velocity large enough to excavate a crater that size in reaching the ground. So there goes that. Lake Checo is not an impact crater, it's just a lake. So, what do you think?
Kind of sad, really.
Okay. So, through scientific consensus, the Tunguska explosion was caused by the impact of a small asteroid. There are some dissenters, like astrophysicist Wolfgang Kundt, who proposed that the Tunguska event was caused by a release of subsequent explosion of 10 million tons of natural gas from within the Earth's crust. Now, the basic idea is that natural gas leaked out of the crust and then rose to its equal density height in the atmosphere. From there, it drifted downwind in a sort of wick, which eventually found an ignition source such as lightning. Once the gas was ignited, a fire streaked along the wick and then down the source of the leak in the ground, whereupon there was an explosion. Now, a similar Verne shot hypothesis has been proposed as a possible cause of the Tunguska event, and other research has proposed a geophysical mechanism for the event. I'm not really buying this wick thing, though, so what do you think? Do you think this Kunt guy is on to something?
He might be onto something, but are we sure that it was an experiment? There's no, I mean, at least exploding mid-air is at least something more than just experiment that went underground and just does a poof and no crater.
Maybe, yeah. So there was another smaller airburst occurred that over a populated area in February 15th, 2013, in Chelyabinsk, an Ural district of Russia. The exploding asteroid was determined to have been an asteroid that measured about 56 to 66 feet across. It had estimated initial mass of 1,000 tons and exploded with an energy release of approximately 500 kilotons. The airburst afflicted over 1,200 injuries, mainly from broken glass falling from windows shattered by a shockwave. And that's pretty much it. That's the Tunguska event. That pretty much concludes the story. So there you have it. It's pretty much the scientific consensus of this event was that it was just a small asteroid that exploded in midair. So whether that's true or not, that's up for debate. What do you think?
I mean, it's a possibility that could be true. It could have been Mothra. It could have been some superhuman dying for the hopes of our universe. It could be the comet or an asteroid. I mean, everything points to something hit the ground and exploded, and the wave was heard almost across the world.
So, yeah, there goes that. That's pretty much the Tunguska event. Yeah, I've been Nathaniel Avila.
And I'm Hanyu.
Yeah, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to a Vision podcast, home of wacky talkies, The Kingdom, Evil Exists, and many more.